You want details? Fine. I drive a Ferrari 355 Cabriolet. What's up? I have a ridiculous house in the South Fork. I have every toy you can possibly imagine. And best of all, kids, I am liquid. So, now you know what's possible. Let me tell you what's required.
All right, we got a couple good ones here. Our first one here, traditional start. He wants to let us know he's 31, white, can still dunk. All right, good for you. Springs on this guy. I'm usually right around 190-ish. Are we going to get to any? You guys, I love that you're doing this, but everybody's doing it. And we had a guy who wrote an email. Kyle submitted it, and it went on for paragraphs, and it had nothing to do with anything. And then, like the last question, he was like, "Hey, what would you suggest for a portfolio?" I'm like, first of all, you shouldn't listen to me, and second of all, like, what the hell was all the other stuff you wrote? You wrote like a book. It'd be like reading Moby Dick, and then at the end, it was a book about a time machine at the very end. Don't steal that idea. Okay, so here we go. All right. I think I find myself in a common dilemma for men my age. Maybe this can help more than just me. My girlfriend and I have been dating for almost 2 years now. We're at the point in time where all of her friends are getting married and having babies. It's definitely giving her FOMO. That's fear of missing out for some of our other guys out there. And her biological clock is ticking away. She brings up the fact that she wants to get married and have babies all the time, especially after a few glasses of wine. Now, this is really annoying, but not so bad because I love her and I do want to start a family with her eventually. But not going to lie here, her consistent nagging and crying on the topic is kind of pushing me away. Part of my reservation on popping the question is because I just feel like marriage is kind of a weird religious tradition. I've never been to church. Oh, and I've never been to church. Why does the government need to be involved? All right, Mel Gibson. I get it, but it's 2021. I feel like we're past due to rethink this whole marriage thing because it's not working out for like 50% of the marriages anyway, right? Not to mention the fact that shit is expensive and we're in the middle of a he says pandemic. Kyle, you use the phrase pandemic ever?
No, but I appreciate it. Lightens it
you
up
like it?
Lightens it up a little
right.
bit.
Okay. All right. You know what? Yeah. Does the pandemic need a rebranding? I don't know if that's been brought up yet.
Good question.
Okay. So I'm going to not judge the guy because I think his heart's in the right place here. All right. But I have an issue here. All right. So do I give her the Heisman, Ryan, on the topic until I'm ready, or do I cave into my girlfriend's wishes, bite the bullet, give into societal norms, and commit to the dad bod? Thanks. Okay. Yeah. Not anything crazy unique here, but let's just put it this way, guys. If you, like you said, you love her and you do want to start a family with her eventually, then you have to do that. You know, I don't think it's crazy for women to kind of get on our cases about like, look, let's start having the kids. And I'll tell you too, like the people that have had families, you know, which is pretty much everybody I know, almost every one of them says the only thing I regret about it is waiting, which always makes me feel great. But you have to like factor that into it. Like I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say, you know, maybe the people that, but again, even generationally, people are getting started later and later. So I don't have like a lot of friends at 21, 22 immediately, you know, right out of college, married and having families. But we have a couple guys in mid to late 20s that got it going and have kids. And now we're looking at, you know, teenagers that are in high school, which, you know, is normal for guys my age. But they almost every one of them was like, you know, I'd rather had been a dad earlier, even if I wasn't in the best position. Because, you know, life has a way of working itself out. I know this is going to sound like a total derailment here, but I was looking at a picture of Van Pelt and I. We were doing a show together, and the picture's great. But in the moment, I wasn't feeling it. There's all sorts of stuff going on, and I was actually kind of miserable. And I looked at that picture, and I go, everything that was going on in your head at that time, none of it mattered. None of it really mattered, and it all kind of worked out. And in a way, it worked out even better than you ever thought it would. And so all the stuff, the baggage that you were dragging around with you every day and not talking to anybody about, and you look at that picture, and I know in the picture where my head was at, but I know that looking back on it, I'm like, what a waste of time. And none of it really mattered. All that stuff that you were obsessed with, none of it mattered. None of it mattered. You're obsessing over and over again. So you being stressed about this, you're going to end up having kids with her, and you're going to look back on this going, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have been so ridiculous about the whole deal. Now, if you're not ready right now, I kind of get it, but that's the part where being a man can be really selfish because, you know, biologically it's different for us. And if she wants to get this going and you love her and you want to have a family, sometimes you have to give in. Not everything is just a straight up compromise. Like, all right, we're going to have kids, but we're not getting a marriage license, Like, look, man, most people do want to do it. I'm not even saying you're wrong. I'm not saying that marriage maybe isn't some completely outdated thing. But if you like her enough that you're admitting in the email that you want to start a family with her, pushing back on that when, women have to worry about this more than we do, it can be a really selfish thing to do. And so if you were to spend more time with her and get more annoyed, and then you decide to call the whole thing off, say, and that's not what you're saying here. Like if you can possibly think of it from a female perspective, it's like, wait, so I spent 3 or 4 years with this guy during these years of my life, and now, I kind of have to start over again. And we can sit there and go, oh my God, this girl's crazy or she's nuts. And trust me, like I've been through it where I still know I'm right, where I'm like, oh, that person I dated was a little difficult to deal with. And you're not even in that boat at all. So I would start to try to see her side of this a little bit more. Yes, I'm sure after a couple Pinots, it gets annoying. And, as guys, like I can do the same thing. It's like, all right, now you're annoying me. So now I definitely don't want to do this. And it doesn't even have to be about relationships. You can be like, now you're so annoying about this. Now I don't want to help you. But this is different. Like there's a partnership here. And you said you love her. You said you want to start a family. Or you said, all right, so part of it you're not loving. It's a title. Okay. It's a title and a marriage license and the paperwork to make it all real. It's going to make her feel more comfortable and more committed. And yeah, I mean, a wedding's an incredible waste of money. It's unbelievable, the markups. And honestly, like if I were starting over and young and getting married and people were going to spend 30, 50 grand on, well, I'd be like, let's use that towards a house. And that's probably why I'm not married. So just try to think about her a little bit more on this one instead of you just being annoyed, because you being annoyed is a far like that burden is far less than her worrying about, is this guy all the way in? That's what she said.
Nice.
We get a ton of these, and I don't know, because usually it leads to asking for a job, which I can't get you. But I'll do one of these now. All right. I'm sure you get these all the time. I'm dedicated to this and would love some advice on the topic. A couple of friends and myself are looking to the sports podcast world. We're all in Michigan. I'm sure you're aware, but sports gambling is now legal there. We've all been gambling since our late years of high school, 10-ish years ago. Wow, look at you guys. Couple Bronx tailors over here, and have been chopping at the bit for it to finally become legal in Michigan. I know there are probably a bunch out there, but we'd really like to start a sports podcast. There are a few, yes, that's centered around sports gambling. I'm sure every group of guys has sat through and thought to themselves that they should work in sports. I really think with the unique backgrounds of the three of us and what we like to think is our expertise in certain sports, we could really be a triple threat. I know, super cheesy, but it just fits. We have schedules that work pretty well where we can get together a couple nights a week to lay out our upcoming shows, but just don't know where we should really start. Any advice on the topic would be greatly appreciated. Hope all is going well with you and look forward to your response. All right, so we are going to respond to this one. So there's a million of these out there, and you could say like, oh, competitive wise, like I wish there weren't as many podcasts. It doesn't go for it. You know what I mean? I would say what's kind of weird though, when you think back to like the days of who was on the air for talk shows, you would be one of the few people that had a sports talk show. Like even, I made this comp when I talked to some kids that were graduating from school in Boston, and I was like, well, how many of you guys want to work at that time? It was really just EEI. And they were like, half the room raised their hand. And you go, well, think about it. Like even in Boston, where it's this major, major market, as sports crazy as any other city, how many great on-air jobs are there? Are there 20, 25? So there just wasn't any room. The math never made any sense to me. You get kids graduating from all over the country, thousands of journalism, communication degree majors. And now with the challenges in print and stuff, like the math just doesn't add up. And I don't say that to discourage anybody, but what is great now, as our emailer says here, you just go ahead and start your own podcast. I think the key that you have to remember here is like, what are your goals, right? Are you doing this to be just do like, this is an incredible thing to think like, hey, I'm going to get together with two of my friends and we're going to do a podcast and we're good to go. No one's going to listen to it, right? Like no one's going to listen to it for maybe the first couple of years, and then maybe no one listens to it after that. And I'm not saying that to be a dick. I'm just going like, you have to be realistic about what you're doing here, because what happens a lot is, if you're starting off and you want to turn this into a career, you have to stand out in a really special way. When people ask me about ESPN, the only reason I got started is because availability. I'd like to think I had some skill that was pretty good for a 29, 30-year-old at that time, but I got in the car and drove down there all the time. And that's not available to almost everybody that's listening to this, okay? Because at the very least, I'd still had a few years under my belt on air at other places. And luckily enough, I was in Boston and it was convenient enough to drive down there. But when I would look at some of the other people that could come in from the outside and really crush, Todd McShay started with this basic startup. It was him, and he was the number 2 guy, and they started breaking down tape on their own, 2 guys sharing a studio apartment. It was this guy that was much older than him, and Todd was just good at breaking down tape. And they started a company, and then ESPN bought the company, and that's how Todd's career started. Brad Edwards, who I traveled with for years, as big a college football guy as I've ever met, was one of the first people that ever really understood the BCS formula. So that was the value that he brought to ESPN. So he was researching. He was never going to be on the air. And then he would sit at home at night calculating how the BCS projections would work out. And he was kind of like the guy that figured it out before anybody else did. And then he would try to tell everybody what the hell he was talking about. And people were like, wait, what? And then he ended up on air because he knew it better than everybody else. So he figured out that one unique thing. I mean, I can keep going here. Joe Lunardi, bracketology. He branded himself as the bracket guy, I believe, before anybody else did. If I'm forgetting someone else, that's fine. But ESPN went ahead and said, okay, go grab that guy. So that's what would happen with a lot of the success stories. Now, there's the traditional go to Syracuse, go to market, whatever the fuck, go to market 40, go to market 20, and then, hey, I'm really good and I can be a guy here for a long time. And, I mean male or female here. When I say guys, it's a little general, but that can happen. The analyst thing, where we can't comp ourselves to any of that kind of stuff. Even Max Kellerman, who, he found a way in. He was doing, I think, like a local access cable boxing show. And somebody, luckily, because he was in New York, and somebody saw it in that market, and they go, this guy's there's some energy about him. So whatever you think of Kellerman, like, he came in from the outside, and then all of a sudden he's doing Friday night fights, and then they go, well, this guy can talk about anything. And, he's had an incredible run, and he left and came back. So you have to find a way if you're really going to pursue this. And so I'm not even talking to the podcaster just here, because I don't know what your goal is, to have fun with friends, or if you really think this is going to be a career. Because if you really think it's going to be a career, how many years can you go before it's actually feasible? Because the downside to having an opportunity is that everybody else has the same opportunity as you do. So it's hard to do, but you have to kind of figure out what's going to make you stand out. And unfortunately, the business rewards standing out in the look at me bullshit opinion stuff, where I feel like that stuff always has an expiration date, I guess, except for a few people. I would never want to do it that way. I just couldn't, because I'd be lying to the audience. I'd be lying to myself. Not that I deserve some fucking medal for it. I just could never do it. And it's really hard to go, okay, what can I do here? And first of all, you got to be good enough. I mean, there's also a chance the 3 of you just aren't going to be that good on the air. I mean, there's a really good chance one of the 3 is going to be bad at it. I mean, it's kind of like first round quarterbacks, right? So again, none of this is to discourage you. It's just to be realistic about it. Because if this is supposed to be fun, this is awesome. Like, how great is that? How great is that 3 buddies can get together and do this? But if you're doing it with the goal that you're going to be able to support a family or something like that long term, it is really, really crowded, and you have to figure out, and this speaks to anyone, not just you emailing, you have to figure out what that lane is for you. Because now the hiring seems to be like, all right, do you have a ton of followers and do you have some video presence? Because I think they brought in like a couple basketball highlight people the last couple of years just because they had a following. And then next thing you know, they were doing on-air content because their following was so massive. And then you have another guy who bought like 1.6 million fake followers and got a huge fucking contract out of it. And then when there was the purge, they were like, oh, I guess that guy didn't have that many followers. So there's ways in, but you got to stand out to have your podcast out there. And then the other thing too is like just to do it totally on your own. It's tough. And also to do it, without that platform, I needed ESPN at a time. All of us that were coming from ESPN, even Bill needed ESPN. Big Cat, PFT. They needed Barstool at some point. Rare is the person who can just say, I'm me, and hit the record button, and then people start to listen. And what's definitely happened more and more, and I can speak this firsthand, is that because everybody's doing a podcast, you'll do like 7 episodes, and then somebody goes, hey, did you just ring around about us? You're like, I'm going to go ahead and save you some legwork here, but it's probably going to be no. It's probably going to be no. So, if the goal is to make this a career, you have to do a couple of years, get those thousands of hours in, learn the skill, listen to yourself and go, would I want to listen to this? Because that's a hard thing to do when you listen to yourself and go, you know what? I'd probably turn this off by now. But, you also have to have this. There's also another part of it too, where you could listen and go, hey, I'm awesome. And you're just bad at listening and you don't even know what you're doing. So every young person that's starting up a podcast, be realistic about I would never tell anyone they can't do something, but be realistic about how just flooded it is. Like I reached out to somebody the other day. He's like a big time guy who has nothing to do with sports. So he just knows that I suck on Twitter. So I don't have that many followers, but enough that it's like, okay, this guy's been around for a while. And I was like, hey, would you want to jump on the podcast ever and talk about some of the stuff you're doing? He was like, dude, no way. Podcast invite. Like, do you want to come on my podcast? Is the new, add me as a friend. It's almost now a joke among people when you add, and then you're like, well, yeah, but there's a decent amount of people listening to mine. So, do you want, and it's like, oh yeah, no, you got a podcast? Cool. You're like, yeah, I do actually. But so, that part of it's kind of funny because it's evolved so much in such a short amount of time. So I hope that wasn't negative. It was just the reality of what's in front of you. But again, if it's just you and your boys just want to hang out, awesome. Great. Have fun with it. All right, let's jump into this one. Eyes wide open. All right. Hey, Ryan, listener from the start of this pod, and while I know this isn't the type of show, I thought I'd share a recent experience and get your thoughts on a quick background. My wife and I were each married before, have kids from those marriages that we have half the time, including every other weekend. We were upper 30s, typical middle-class people. This past weekend, we went out with another couple for my birthday. Long story short, after a lot of tequila, we all ended up in bed together. That's not a movie, right?
I'm sure it's a scene in a movie somewhere, but
yeah, double checking. This isn't something any of us ever experienced or even discussed before, but now what? The next day, a short, everyone good message was sent and all involved said yes. What's that thread going to be like the next couple of weeks? Hey, have you guys seen this Cecil Hotel doc? Highly recommend. Oh, thanks for the heads up. Meant to check that out. Is it good? Yeah, it's good. Can you forward me that tapas recipe you were talking about? Okay, excellent. All right, so everyone said yes. Do we try to broach the subject or let it be? Are they wondering the same? Next time we all go out, will we think it's an invitation for that again? Where do we go from here and how do we go there? Thanks. I don't know. I don't have, if this were my deal, I wouldn't admit it, but I can just tell you honestly, this is not my deal. Pandemic, man. Doesn't sound like there was 6 feet of distance there, but I just can't believe how awkward this is going to be from now on, unless this now becomes your lifestyle. And that, my man, is a hard left turn, because then I think you would get invited to all sorts of stuff. Like, I don't know if this pineapple thing in the front yard is real or not. I've heard about it. I swear, I think everybody hears about this lifestyle. It's like Sasquatch, I mean, look, some of you guys listening right now, you're like, no, it's a real thing. And that's cool. I'm not judging, but that relationship is forever different. Like, you understand that, right? And the chances are, as you expand the group dynamic, somebody's going to have a problem with somebody else. And then I guess there's all sorts of rules, where I think a lot of these end up where like, there's a cross matching there, like in transition defense in basketball, where somebody's like, I like this matchup better than the original matchup that I was assigned to when we tipped it up. And now, then the other people are like, you're switching too much. So yeah, I don't really have, I think that this is going to be forever different. I think I'd worry more about the wife part of it. Because what if she's like, yeah, that's actually my deal. You're like, whoa, maybe you're into it. I don't know. Maybe you just untap something in your late 30s where now you're fulfilled in a way that guys only see on Showtime late. I just don't have much for you. Sorry. Kyle, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm fine pulling up 0 times on this podcast. I got nothing.
You're not a big orgy guy then? Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah, I got nothing to say about this one. And that's all I'll say about this one.
Okay. Yeah. I think everybody's better off than that. I mean, this guy's just emailing. You're on air. I have the podcast named after me. So yeah. But I'm just wondering if this is, I mean, look, obviously this isn't so far-fetched. It's not like it's Cure lyrics here. So yeah, I think we're good. Enjoy the weekend, everyone. Some will enjoy it more than others.